Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Bruce Spence. I'm filling in for Dennis Ward this week. With the Olympics just around the corner, we are putting Indigenous youth and sports in focus today. We want you to join in our conversation. Our phone lines are open now. Call us toll-free at 1-877-647-2786. And if you're into Twitter, you can tweet us at APTN InFocus using the hashtag Indigenous Sport. Before I introduce you to our guests, let's set the scene a little. Here's one Indigenous player who is making her mark in hockey and making some history at the same time.
From the small community of Mallard, Manitoba, to representing her country and making history, Brigette Lacquette is the first First Nations to be named to the Canadian Women's Olympic Hockey Team.
First Nation, I guess that's just, it's an honor for me, and it's just, it's something it's truly special and exciting for me, and, I'm humbled by it.
While preparing for the upcoming Olympics in South Korea, Lacquette's biggest fans cheered her on from the stands. For months, the 25-year-old defender has been connecting with these students from Eagle Lodge Family School.
Doing video chats with them and everything, and sending them videos, sending them work to do, but to actually finally get to see them and meet them and interact with them, it was pretty amazing.
It was really cool to see Brigette on the ice. I can learn what she experienced throughout how she got onto the team.
And after the practice,
I wasn't expecting them to honor me with a song and honor my friends with a song, so I'm just super excited to have them here today.
The team's first game is a match against Russia on February 11. As Lacquette hits the ice, not only will she be representing Canada, but all Indigenous as well, including these students who call her their mentor.
I want to be that role model for them, and just to be the best player, best person I could possibly be just for them, to show them that they could do it too.
Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
Well, that's a little bit of an opener for us today. I am joined in studio by Philip Paul Martin to my immediate left. Philip Paul Martin is a sports writer going back for quite a while and owner of Native Hockey News website. And Trevor Phillips, U of M, PhD candidate, working with, got a podcast going there, and you're also calling hockey games for the Bisons and other sports as well.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us. Well, and on the phone joining us this afternoon is Tara Garrioch. She is the former goaltender for the University of Manitoba Bisons, and she's also the sister of Brigette Lacquette, who you just saw skating around in Calgary getting ready for the Olympics. Thanks so much for joining us today. We'll start with you, Tara. As you just saw, your sister Brigette will be part of the Team Canada for women's hockey. We've heard her say that you were her inspiration. Have you heard from Brigette since she went over to Pyongyang? What did you guys talk about?
Yes, she called yesterday about 6 or 7 o'clock at night, and I think it was about 8 o'clock in the morning over there or something. But yeah, she talked about how stressful it was and how intense she was feeling that, because she had a game yesterday, I wasn't sure how she was doing, but she had said, it's such a different atmosphere over there than it is in Canada. It's still minus 20 over there, but she still feels like it's a bit of a different world for her.
Who was your inspiration when you were starting out? Who pointed you in the direction of playing hockey?
Well, actually, my sister had started playing hockey first as a 6-year-old, and then 2 or 3 years down the line when my brother had started playing as a 4-year-old, my dad shoved me in net as well because there were 3 kids and my mom was still in school, and he had to keep us busy somehow. So I was put in sports. I was put into hockey after my sister had already started playing. So I was about 4 years behind her at that point, and I couldn't really skate. So my first year I was playing out as a player, and then my second year I was in net as a goalie, and I've been there ever since.
So did you say that your dad shoved you in goal?
Yeah. Wow. I was more of a liability out there.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I was put in net and I was told to follow directions, and that's what I did.
Okay, so did you get into like league games and then high school, that type of thing? How did you end up with the Bisons?
I had started off playing my minor hockey in Winnipegosis with my sister, and at that time we were in novice and we were playing only boys hockey. And up until Pee Wee's bantam age, that's when we started getting into the female game. So we were playing both boys and girls hockey growing up, and I think I started actually like developing and refining my goaltending skills by bantams and well into midgets. There was we didn't know a lot about the NCAA programs or the CAS programs, but we had there was a couple of girls around our area that had gone to an NCAA school, and we were just playing it by ear and trying to figure out on our own what school we were going to go to or something like that.
Well, I guess it was the University of Manitoba that was fortunate enough to get you guys on your team. You played 3 seasons with the Bisons. Looks like 2010-11 was your best year, 17 games played, goals against average of 1.66. That's pretty good. Do you think that it was difficult balancing sports and classes and exams and lectures and all that academic pressure, balancing that with your time on the ice?
Yes, it was. For the most part, it was trying to get to class in the mornings after you're dead tired. We'd have an early morning ice session on one day during the week, so we'd go on at 6:30, 7 o'clock, and then have an 8:30 lecture. So we'd have lectures all morning, and then the afternoons would be either working out and then going to hockey practice for a couple hours, or going to hockey practice for a couple hours and then working out after that. And then having maybe 2 or 3 hours to study, and then having 8 hours of sleep the next night. So it was very difficult.
I went to university and I had trouble juggling 3 classes and no sports at all, so I can imagine how it was. Would you say that Indigenous youth should seriously consider athletics as part of their life plan?
Absolutely. I would definitely attest to that, because for my life, if I hadn't been where I had been or have played the sports that I have played, I don't think I'd be the same person whatsoever. It really took my mind off a lot of stuff when I was able to play and be good at something. If I wasn't having a very good day at school or anywhere else outside of life, it's just, if I wasn't having a very good day, that's something I knew that I could go in and do something really good at, and then go back and try to deal with my problems outside of the rink and stuff like that.
Right on. So you're nursing now? You're into nursing? You're training for that or in school for that?
Yes, I'm in school for nursing right now, and it's about the same. I have 2 kids and a husband now to take care of, so it's a lot of balancing as a student athlete, as a parent. It's the same, similar attributes. I would say that the most difficult part is trying to find the time to study, but so far so good.
Well, that's quite a load you're carrying there, but you're used to carrying entire teams of players on your shoulders, being in nets like that. So we're going to bring our other guests in right about now. With the Olympics just around the corner in Korea, Renee Burke is joining the team for Team Canada on the men's side. Spencer O'Brien from the West Coast is into her second Olympics for snowboarding. Jesse Cockney is going for his second Olympics as well for cross-country skiing. Kevin Coe is skipping Team Canada for the men's Olympic curling team. What are you guys hoping to see from these athletes at the Olympics? We'll start with you, Phil, just because you're right in front of me.
Well, it's interesting you should mention, because to become an Olympic athlete, I mean, the road is long, and I guess what a lot of people don't see is the training and preparation that goes into being an Olympic athlete. These aren't professional athletes per se. So the paychecks aren't there. So you got to love to do what you do every day, to get out of bed, to do the running, to lift the weights, to to do the calisthenics and stretching and all those things. And that's even before, that's in preparation before you're going to get coached for your particular event. You know, certainly in hockey, I mean, this is going to be, particularly on the men's side, something that I'm actually interested in watching. Because to have the National Hockey League players participate, it was just a question of, you know, what kind of style is Canada going to play to lock down the goal? Because we, you know, but it's not that way this time. We got a blend of European and American Hockey League players and a couple of college players. We haven't had, you know, we haven't had a tournament that's going to be this interesting since we had a national team back in '88 and '92. So it's going to be one that I'm going to be watching with a lot of interest. Rene Bourque, you mentioned previously, his career is winding down. I mean, this would be a great capper on his career to actually medal on a team that's really not they'll compete, but we don't know what the expectations are, whether they're going to medal or not. So it's going to be really interesting to watch.
We've got more on Rene Bourque a little bit further down into the show, but those are some interesting points you bring up there. These guys aren't, they're not the highly paid athletes that say somebody in some of the leagues in the States are, the NWCAA football players, that type of thing, who have all kinds of endorsements lined up. They got some income. You got to keep your marks up, though. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
you know what? Another thing that a lot of people should be aware of is, and I've certainly talked to some players that have made the National Hockey League, like Jonathan Chichu. I've talked to Rene Bourque and different players. And I guess what a lot of people aren't aware of is to even make that level of play to be a professional athlete as a hockey player. Our players face a lot of strife within just to get there. Just to get there is an accomplishment, and to exceed those expectations and to pick up a paycheck as a professional hockey player is an accomplishment. I remember Jonathan Chichu telling me that he was one of the best players on his rep teams growing up, and was one of the last players added to the team simply because of the fact that we were Aboriginal and or Native. So these are things that our athletes don't often like talking about. But as you spend time with them and you get to see them over a period of years, it certainly comes out as an issue. So I think that's something the public needs to be aware of, that it's sacrifice plus for a lot of our athletes to make it to that level.
So Trevor Phillips, Philip Paul Martin, excuse me, Mr. Cooey, I mispronounced his name as well. You'll have to forgive me, I'm new to this. Anyway, you've seen a lot of sports at the post-secondary level. What do you think our youth should be aware of? If you're good at sports, do you try for the scholarship? What role would sport play on an Indigenous youth from your perspective?
Well, the difference, I think, between going through the collegiate system in Canada and maybe going through an academy-based program south of the border is that the impetus on the academic side of things is massively important. And so students are expected to balance a load that is not common in the Canadian collegiate system or in the American academy system. And I think that's one of the major differences. So when we think about pushing our youth towards high-level training opportunities, maybe moving into urban centers to get access to coaching, and we start to displace their whole sphere of community and their whole sphere of comfort, we also have to remember that we're putting an immense strain on their intellectual sphere at the same time that we're asking them to improve their physical sphere. So when I think about holistic approaches to helping Indigenous youth or helping them develop their athletic skill, it is an amazing balancing act that happens at the same time that a change in community is happening. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges. So if I'm encouraging Indigenous youth to go into a post-secondary system, like, for example, playing for the University of Manitoba Bisons, one of the biggest things that they're going to face is how can you equally spend your time with your nose in the books and your butt in the workout facility.
What kind of supports are there out there for, say, there's a kid in grade 8, grade 9, he's starting to move into high school. The pressure of being that age group are hard enough, but you're thinking of your future and you're good at some sports, but your marks are a little bit sketchy. you know darn well you got to pick your marks up to stay there to get to that level. What kind of supports are there out there for that situation?
I think most quality programs, especially elite level programs, offer some sort of academic assistance. They're offering tutors, or they're offering the ability to flex time. They're also giving condensed or even flexible exam scheduling, for example. I know at the high school that I went to, there was an elite athlete program. I don't think the Indigenous enrollment in that program was very high, but at the same time, it does allow you that flexibility to have a workable schedule. For example, with the Manitoba Bisons, they have a flexible travel schedule. So if you need to get time with your tutors, or if you need to get time with your instructors, then that's an opportunity to do that.
All right. Well, hold that thought. It's time for a break, our first break of the afternoon. And you guys out there in TV land, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a few messages.
Conversation now. Send your thoughts in an email to infocus@aptn.ca. Like our APTN InFocus Facebook page. Follow and tweet us @APTN InFocus, or call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786.
Oh, welcome back to In Focus. We're going to go straight to the social media boards now to hear from you guys out there and see what some of you are saying about today's topic. We asked, why do you think sports are so important for Indigenous youth? And Clifford Crane said, competition sports aids in physical, emotional, and mental development. Can't say where I'd be today without the push I got from playing hockey, football, volleyball, and track. Winnie Malbouf followed up on Clifford's comment by saying it gives them self-esteem. They need to learn how to deal with the ugliness, role models for others to follow, knowing that they can and will continue to be the best they can be. And Stephen Leskovitz, it is important for the physical training lost from lack of cultural practices. And Mel Dokas, sports can open many doors of opportunity if one takes advantage of it. Now, if you'd like to add your opinion to our topic of conversation, here's how.
Join our conversation now. Send your thoughts in an email to infocus@aptn.ca. Like our APTN InFocus Facebook page. Follow and tweet us @APTN InFocus, or call in toll-free at 1-877-647-2786.
Who was that voice? Anyway, before we get back to our guests, as we mentioned earlier, Métis hockey player René Bourque will be representing Team Canada at the Olympics in less than a couple of weeks. Now, APTN's Tom Fenario had spoken with him when he was still playing with the Montreal Canadiens alongside Carey Price back in the 2013-2014 season. Here's a look back at that story.
For René Bourque, it doesn't get much better than this. With his team facing elimination last night, he rose to the occasion in a major way. With 21,000 fans cheering themselves hoarse, Bourque scored a hat-trick, allowing the Canadiens to live another day. You could say that Bourque's an unlikely hero. When APTN spoke with him during training camp in September, he was already talking playoffs.
As a group, we want to take another step forward, especially in playoffs.
But it's been a trying season for the 32-year-old. He was bounced around from line to line, and eventually he was benched for several games in March. Bourque was dismissed by pundits as nonchalant and uncaring, and was rumored to be on the trading block. But anyone who thought of Bourque as done doesn't know his story, doesn't know that his difficult season pales in comparison to the game that marked him for life.
I knew right away when I got cut that it was bad.
While playing for the Chicago Blackhawks in 2006, Bourque's jugular vein was cut by an opponent's skate.
When you start getting on the doctor's table and they're looking at you, you could just tell that they were very concerned, and that's when I looked into the trainer's eyes and the doctor's eyes, I knew I was in trouble.
It took some time for Bourque to mentally refine his game after that devastating injury, but he defied the odds. something he's been doing his whole career.
I wasn't really a highly touted kid coming out of junior hockey or anything like that, so I wasn't really surprised that I didn't get drafted.
Not many make it all the way, especially when they go undrafted by a pro team. He credits his blue-collar upbringing in the Métis community of Lac-La-Biche, Alberta, for instilling the work ethic he needed to make the show. So he makes a point of giving back. On more than one occasion, he's donated 50 sets of hockey equipment to Métis and First Nation communities in the Lac-La-Biche area. He knows as well as anyone that hockey is an expensive sport.
Anytime I was getting new equipment when I was young, it was almost like Christmas, so you could see the smile on their faces and the difference that it makes for them.
Last night was undoubtedly one that Bourque will remember forever. Perhaps most importantly, it served notice. His career is far from done, and there's still time for a few more highlights. Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
Well, Raymond Bourque is one of those players that they're great when you're seeing them in the present tense, and then you don't see them for a while, and then you wonder what happened to him. Raymond Bourque is currently playing in the Swedish Hockey League for Stockholm, I believe, and we'll be seeing him suiting up again for action with Team Canada at the Winter Olympics in Korea. Well, thanks for staying with us. We're still joined here with Philip Paul Martin and Trevor Phillips, and we have Tara Garrioch on the line. And I'll just throw a question out here. Canada has extra pressure in the Winter Olympics, especially in hockey. What do you expect from, we'll start with you, Tara. What are you expecting from the women's team?
Well, I'm expecting them to have a lot of competition between the States, obviously, but the other smaller countries are actually picking up their game as well. So it should be a good competition all the way around. Well,
I guess a gold medal. There's always been this rivalry with the U.S. team, the U.S. women, and it gets quite rough at times. Are you expecting a rough series, in terms of throwing the body around and maybe not so much scoring, but hard hitting?
Yes, absolutely. I wouldn't say anyone doesn't want it any more than Canada does. So everybody should be expected to play as rough and tough as Canada and the U.S.
What about the men's, Trevor?
Well, the men, Philip touched on this in the segment before, but the composition of the team is completely different this year. So the expectations in some ways are a little bit more focused on what style they're going to play, what kind of goaltending they're going to get, and what is the chemistry is going to be like. What kind of system are they going to play? To be honest with you, I'm a little more well versed with the women's side of things because I call the women's hockey for the Bisons, and it's the same four powerhouse teams that it always is: Sweden, Finland, the United States, and Canada. And that was the way it hashed out at the Four Nations Cup. But yeah, the physicality is going to be through the roof in both the men's and women's divisions, and it's just going to be fantastic hockey. It's a great time to be a fan of Canadian athletes, and especially our Indigenous athletes that have made it there.
Well, there is the time difference. You're going to have to get up awfully early in the morning to watch the games live. Are you that dedicated that you're?
I have a good PVR system, so I should be okay.
Yeah, Phil, what are you seeing?
Well, let's not fool ourselves here. The real competition is between the United States and Canada in the women's game, and that I fully expect that heading into this tournament. These two teams know each other very well. They played a series going from coast to coast in Canada and stopping here at Bell MTS Place in Winnipeg, where I had a chance to take in the game. And for the women's game, it was very physical. These two teams do not like each other, which makes for a better hockey game. And for viewers to assume that Canada is dominant over the States, they're not. They're batting about 500. In the game here that was played in Winnipeg, Canada won in the last few seconds by a 2-1 score. So this will be, I expect, a gold medal match between the United States and Canada. And there was some doubt. There was one defenseman they had to cut when they were here in Winnipeg. I had a 90% expectation that Brigette was going to make that team. And one of her advantages of her was that her college coach is the coach of Team Canada. So I expected her to to be on that team. Offensively, she's an offensively gifted defenseman. She moves the puck well, makes that first snappy pass up the ice to relieve the pressure. She is good. She's good to very good defender, but there are other defensemen for Team Canada that play well down low to the post. So I think that she's going to be a key part of Team Canada, particularly on the power play, because she's offensively gifted.
You know, when my experience has been that ice time is always there, and I was always the guy that rode the bench. In the big games, when the pressure was on, there was always a few people that were the one sent over the boards ahead of my. Does that happen with your experience, Trevor? Is it equal ice time for everybody there, or do they have to favor certain players because of certain situations?
I think at the women's collegiate level here in Canada West, I think Coach John Rempel, he's been at the helm for a really long time. He likes to play his matchups against certain teams, so he generally has a fairly balanced lineup. He'll roll four lines. He'll try to get everybody out there against the right kind of opponent. But in Canada West women's hockey, it's all about that first pass. If you can make a first pass tape to tape on the stick through the neutral zone and create speed, you're gonna have a chance to play, and you're gonna get out on the ice. You're gonna get a chance to show your stuff in front of Canada West. So yeah, I think that there are times when you will see a shortened bench. A lot of the time in overtime, with the overtime system that exists in Canada West, they go 4-on-4 then 3-on-3. So yeah, no, I think. If you don't have that kind of depth, you're not going to compete at the Canada West level, and that's the same at the Olympic level as well. You need everybody pulling on the rope together.
Another thing we got to consider too is that the playing surface is different at the Olympics. In both games, it's bigger. It's 200 by 100, and that changes the dynamics of the game simply because it can change the shooting angles and the way goaltenders defend their crease and handle shots as to where, we have different styles of goaltenders to absorb the puck. We have others that are trained to kick the rebounds out to the corners. So with that extra 15 feet of space, or 7.5 feet on either side, can make a big difference. So I think that's one of the reasons why they're over there early to adjust to that playing surface.
So Tara, you've got some on ice experience in these situations. What do you make of what's happening? I know you've talked to Brigette a few times. You're not actually over in Korea, but you've been in situations like this. You've played many minutes and periods and games of hockey from the goaltender's perspective. What's your analysis of ice time, strategy, what the coach is going to do, what individual defensemen are going to do? You're closest to your defensemen or defensewomen, is that the correct term? Your defenders are, you've got to be in contact with them. What do you see happening out there?
I think that everybody has their role and everybody knows their role. So with the different roles on the team, they do have a lot of defensive defensemen that can defend the puck and push the puck to the corners and get everyone calm down in their own end and then get the puck out. And they have their good offensive defensemen, such as my sister, and that really helps them gain confidence on different power plays or on different lines with different people. So if they feel like they need a little bit of an extra push, they'll put the offensive defenseman out there to try get some momentum going in their offensive game. Or if they find themselves trapped for a few minutes at a time in their own zone, then they'll lean towards the more defensive defenseman. As a goalie, I found it really beneficial to my team if my teammates, if the defensive defensemen were there and you could communicate with them because you knew what to expect from what they were going to do. And they had everything that, their assets that helped them get, to their level of play that helped them get to their ice time. So if they log a lot of ice time but they don't score a lot of goals, they're still really beneficial to the team.
I don't know much about women's hockey. I haven't spent a lot of time watching it. They're generally speaking, they're lower scoring games. There's not 10-1 blowouts or anything like that. But it's more like 1-0, 2-0, 2-1. Am I right on that? Or Tara, what's your insight on that?
I think the girls' game is takes a lot more skill to get from point A to point B, because everybody has an equal playing field for where, like, their height, their size, their weight, and how hard they can shoot or how hard they can pass. So they have to make, like, the quick passes and then get a few extra feet of ice time, or a few extra feet of ice in front of the other player, the defensive player. I find that they're not constantly worrying about getting rocked or, like, trying to move the puck before someone comes and, like, hits them and stuff like that. So that physical contact part of it, it may not be, like, legal. They're still playing the body and stuff like that, but they're not worried about getting killed on the ice.
How about getting killed as a goaltender? You've been involved in that from that perspective, watching the game and participating in the game, especially at a very, very competitive level. What is that like for you?
Well, you're mostly just trying to ward off, like, people getting, like, slashing you in the face or slashing you on the wrist and just jamming you with their stick. So you're kind of thinking about that part of it, and when you're going down to save a puck, you're just thinking about where your positioning is. If your head's in a vulnerable position, you're trying to get your blocker up and stuff like that. Just little things.
You know, here's a question I'll just throw out there. It's kind of like the Don Cherry thing. He doesn't like European hockey players. Finland and Sweden are the other teams, especially with the women's side. And the style of play between Canada and the U.S. is very physical. I've seen the women rougher than the men. And what is it like when you throw in the European game? Is that are they like that as well, or are they more finesse players, more tic-tac-toe, fancy passing?
No, in the girls' game, I think it's pretty equal amongst all the other countries. But, like, Canada and the U.S. do have that physical, like, attribute to them as well. But the European, I think they're kind of catching on to that. Like, because a lot of the European girls come play in, like, the NCAA, and they're playing overseas in Canada and stuff like that. So they get a lot of those teammates that are physical, and their coaches are encouraging them to become more like that. I think that they would take that home back to their countries as well.
Yeah, they're closing the gap. I mean, when the women's game started, like, internationally, it was just Canada and the United States, and you know, to watch either of those two teams play Sweden or Finland or Norway, the games weren't even close. So they've actually done a great job of closing the gap in the last 10 to 15 years. So it's no longer the blowout that they once were. But, I mean, the class of international women's hockey is the United States and Canada. So it's a tough team to make for any of these athletes. They sacrifice a lot, as I alluded to earlier. And it's going to come down to not who wants it more, but who executes their particular system. And, you know, as a coach heading into the games now, you want your team peaking for that Olympic tournament. And that's a difficult proposition for a coach, to get your team functioning and firing on all cylinders when they drop the puck, that first puck in South Korea. And that's a challenge for the coaching staff as well.
You want to jump in there, Trevor?
Yeah, about the comment on style of play, it really does come down to being able to take and make a pass on the fly as quickly as possible. That's the recipe for success in the NHL. If you can take and make a pass on the fly, then you're going to have a long career. In the women's game at the Olympic level, parity has been a little bit of a problem. They've tried to address it. Canada Women's Hockey has been a part of committee meetings on these types of things. It's about growing the game internationally. China put a bunch of money into their program when they hosted the Olympics back in 2008, and you're starting to see that flesh itself out over the years. Finland, Sweden, Canada, the United States, of course, are the top tier. But on the University of Manitoba Bisons, Van Lahovy, one of the leaders of the team, she's going to be in her third Olympics at Pyeongchang. And one of the differences that I've noted in her game, this being an Olympic year, and I didn't cover the team 4 years ago, but her training went a level up. Van Lahovy is a vegetarian. She works hard on her physical health, and she is way stronger this year than she was last year. I bet she's added 3 or 4 miles an hour to her wrist shot alone. And in the women's game, that is a significant difference. At the men's game level, 4 miles an hour is the difference maybe between getting a shot past the defender, blocking a shot. In the women's game, that's the difference between getting one over the blocker or over the glove side in that much of a hurry, because you're dealing with a different kind of spatial fight. In the men's game, you might fight through a check. In the women's game, you're fighting through an angle. And that's a completely different sort of conceptual leap in that type of hockey. So I think that's something to watch. And the athletes that have really pushed themselves for this Olympic year are the ones that are separating themselves at their collegiate club levels already.
Wow. Well, that's heavy stuff, Trevor. Listen, we have to take another break. When we come back, we all have to start somewhere, and we'll talk a little bit about getting to the point where you're in the Olympics or at the NHL level. So stay with us. Welcome back to In Focus. I'm your host, Bruce Spence, and we're going to have another look at another story, and it's another hockey story. It's from 2007. It's about a couple of kids who are in the spotlight for their accomplishments that they had attained at the time. A Memorial Cup win for a kid from the Blood Reserve in Alberta. And a 19-year-old from Anaheim Lake, British Columbia, was named Most Outstanding Goalie in Canadian Junior Hockey. APTN's Rob Smith spoke with Wacy Rabbit when the City of Vancouver honored the Cup champion Vancouver Giants. And he caught up with Carey Price just weeks after he rose to stardom, backstopping Team Canada to a gold medal at the World Junior Championship.
Mueller on Price. Peter Mueller in. Stopped by Price. Canada's going to the gold medal game at the World Junior Hockey Championship.
It was a defining moment few athletes experience. A game-winning save in a shootout against his country's biggest rival. A save that put Team Canada in the final of the 2007 World Junior Championships in Europe. Carey Price goes on to backstop the Canadians to a gold medal against Russia. He would be named best goalie and its MVP. An outstanding tournament, but it was the save against Team USA that made Price a junior hockey hero. In his last game as a junior, 20-year-old Wacy Rabbit achieved his dream, a Memorial Cup championship. Rabbit was traded to the Giants earlier this year. He was an instant fan favorite. The day he arrived in Vancouver, a sports talk radio station voted Wacy Rabbit the best sports name, beating out monikers like former Canuck Yuri Bubla and basketball player Cherokee Parks. Rabbit and Price break the stereotype that Aboriginal talents have a hard time making it off the reserve.
People 10 years ago, they go for a month and they get homesick. When you look around the league, and the stereotype's gone. I think guys like Chichu and Tutu and Ted Nolan, they open those doors for guys like us. So I think we just got to keep doing a good job, and I think creating a good image for the younger kids, and hopefully they open doors for the further generation after that.
Got a lot of emails from First Nations people back home, and that really kept me going. I kept a lot of them. I mean, they're right behind me, and it was nice to get that support from everybody.
Price is enjoying the spotlight now. A surprise top 10 pick in the 2005 NHL entry draft, he logged a subpar season back in juniors. He was cut from Team Canada that year, but his coach says that bitter disappointment forced his game to another level.
I think, really focused on making the team this year, but not just making the team, sitting on the bench. He wanted to be the guy. He was out to prove to people that he was the best goaltender in the world, which I think he did.
It's pretty tough to get to the NHL, especially as a goaltender, so I just got to give a full effort. If I work hard at it, I'm sure I'll be there eventually.
For I, Sam Sullivan, Mayor of the City of Vancouver, do hereby proclaim Tuesday, May 29th as the Vancouver Giants Day in the City of Vancouver. Thank you.
For Wacy Rabbit, a much longer shot to make the NHL, this may be the pinnacle of his hockey career, and he credits his parents for the success he has experienced.
My parents were there for me. They said, there's telephones, that's what telephones are for. If you get homesick, call, but you're there, enjoy it, and if you want to play hockey, this is what you have to do.
This regular season tilt back in January had Price's Tri-City Americans playing Rabbit's Giants. Price would stone Rabbit with an amazing save. Rabbit would exact a little revenge, scoring late in the game. The Americans eventually won. With Rabbit off to the Boston Bruins training camp this year and Price a Montreal Canadiens prospect, the rematch may be an Original Six battle in the NHL. For APTN National News, I'm Rob Smith in Vancouver.
Well, it's always great to see how far some athletes go in their careers. Wasey, we haven't seen much of him lately. Of course, Carey continues to play well in the National Hockey League. Our social media question we had asked earlier was, why do you think sports are so important for Indigenous youth? Tara, what kind of a tournament situation, what kind of tournaments did you play in as a youth, and how did that help get you to where you are, or where you are today?
Well, for the girls program, I played with the under 18 Team Manitoba team. We had gone to the program of excellence. We've played in Napanee and Kitchener, and I found it to be very exciting to be in that level, to play against other girls our age that are on the Olympic team now.
Well, I guess it's a situation where you're playing and you don't know where this path is going to lead you, but you know your sister's in the Olympics, and you've played with other girls in other stages of your life, and they're in the Olympics too.
Yes, they are. I think it was 2008. We were playing against Marie-Philippe Poulin when she was playing on Team Quebec, and Spooner the year before, when she was playing with Team Ontario Red, stuff like that.
Wow. Now, Philip, how important is it for events such as the North American Indigenous Games and the World Indigenous Games to develop young athletes?
I think it gives youth an opportunity to take their games to a higher stage. Right, to get that feel of the bright lights and the larger venues and things like that, because your challenge, I guess, as a coach is to say that it's the same game once the puck drops or you know, once the ball is tipped or whatever the case may be. But as a player, it gives them an opportunity, because you know, simply by percentages, a lot of the athletes, participants, that'll be as far as they go. So you got, you know, in terms of development of Indigenous youth, we have to give them those opportunities to say I went to an Indigenous Games and things of this nature, because it's going to be something that they'll remember for the rest of their lives.
Trevor?
Yeah, I think some of the points that Philip brought up are spot on. The elevated action of play is one of the things that you have to take into consideration. For example, in the women's hockey sector, the Female Sports School Challenge, which was here in Winnipeg this past year, the level of skill is a massive jump when you start dealing with NCAA skilled level players. And I remember in my youth, we went down to Great Falls, Montana to play a bunch of Division I schools in baseball, and we got no hit in 3 out of 4 games. So when you start to elevate your skill level, you start to see where you are measured in terms of all things, all capacities, training, competition level, resiliency, all these really important factors. The North American Indigenous Games is one of those special circumstances where you get to represent your nation, and I personally love that opportunity. I never got the chance to compete myself, but for those that I know who did, they absolutely loved it.
Well, you know, there's hockey's not the only game in town, even though it's almost the only game that we've been talking about this afternoon. It's the middle of hockey season, and the Olympics are happening, the Winter Olympics, and if you're not into skiing, what else is there but hockey? Sorry about that, folks. But there are other sports. There's lacrosse, there's fastball, there's track and field, football. We've got, even within our APTN family, Sandra Seidel, her boy, Rain, was drafted by the University of North Dakota Fighting Hawks. You know, they had to change their name, but you know, he came up through high school, and he's done quite well for himself. And what other ways is there to get started? Tara, you touched on a few things there with going to tournaments as a younger player. What other measures can a young person take to get involved in sports to the point where it leads them to a better life later on in life?
In high school, I was a multi-sport athlete. I did play like softball. I was in track and field. I did play volleyball. I tried curling once even. It's just like finding something that makes you happy and makes you feel like you can do this, like do this to be like successful, or do this to have an out for something. And like I found it really helpful for myself when I was able to play softball and able to catch a puck, like kind of things like that kind of interject with each other, and you're able to like use your one skill for something else.
Yeah, I never thought of that. That's good advice. What more advice would you give? You come from Mallard, Skowhenan, up in the Interlake. It's pretty remote, sort of. It is kind of remote up there, and there's a lot of kids in a lot of communities way up in the bush, way out in the middle of the prairie somewhere, and they want to get off the reserve. They want to get out of town. They want to go somewhere, and sports will take them there. But what kind of advice, Tara, would you offer to somebody in that situation?
I found that like day to day, you don't realize the difference like one day could make for you. Like you have to take yourself back and look at the big picture of your life and think about like, okay, well, I want to end up here. What things can I do right now? Like, can I go work out? Can I eat this like pork or whatever you're going to eat for supper? And can I do this? And I'll do everything and be successful. What can I do to get myself to the very, very end? And you think about that every day, not every day, like maybe once a week, and like kind of check yourself to see where you are in your life and how much farther you need to go to get there.
What do you talk to kids about, Trevor? I'm sure you see a lot of young athletes coming up, young students.
I've had the opportunity to do some youth working in communities in northern Alberta, some Métis settlements, and including some First Nation reserves in the area. And without a doubt, physical literacy, as Tara is talking about, is the building block, the bedrock of creating resilient athletes, students. When you get a job, those types of things, you start to learn the essential skills to being competent with your hand-eye coordination and thinking through how these things happen. I remember when I went up to my community one time there, and we were just playing kickball. You know, we were working on using our hands and feet in different ways, in ways in which we maybe were not invited to do before. And I think just helping youth to understand the limits and capacities of their bodies. I had a coach tell me once that the difference between an athlete and everybody else is that an athlete knows their body better than anyone else. And that's the way in which, you know, we have to think through our relationship to the sport, to life, to the land, whatever, what have you, and what we do. And so, yeah, building physical literacy component, that's major. The other aspect that I would add, and this is the thing that I've seen that is really difficult, is access to good food and access to good equipment. And we always need to be thinking about the ways that athletes, we saw in the story, the way that Wacy Rabbit donated equipment. That's an incredible thing. It's things that pro athletes from Indigenous communities are always mindful of, which is brilliant. I love that. And the other thing that Tara mentioned is, you know, what can I eat and what can't I eat? So getting good quality food in there and making sure you build good habits, and sport can do that for Indigenous youth.
Phil, we've got about a minute and a half to go. What do you say to some kid that you think might make it?
Well, here's the thing. There's a difference between being an athlete competing in an individual sport as opposed to a team sport. So if you're dealing with hockey, you can make yourself the best physical being you can be, but how do you mesh in terms of functioning within your team? And I think these are qualities that a lot of companies are looking for later in life. So, you know, if I'm hiring for a major corporation and I have a choice between an individual performer and somebody who's played well in a team sport and made it to an Olympic athlete, that tells me something. So athletics is a case of it's a building block to where you're going to go. And I would suggest that a team sport is an excellent way of building those skills that you're going to need later in life.
Unless you're really good with a pool cue, then you can. But even there's aspects of team play in that as well. Well, I want to thank you guys for joining us there. We're just about running out of time. Tara, it's been a great afternoon talking to you from way out there in Brandon. All the best to you out there, and good luck with your career as a nurse, and good luck to your sister. If you could express those feelings from all of us here today next time you speak to her over there at the Winter Olympics. Philip, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Trevor, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much.
All right. Well, okay, we're out of here in about 20 seconds. You can play the music and all that stuff. Yeah. Thanks for joining us.